All right. So, this might be one of my last, if not the last video I do political video specific to the presidential race. It's possible I'll still do more before election day, but it's Monday already, so chances are no. But I wanted to talk about Trump's tariffs because a lot of people are so very convinced that their lives were better under Trump, and it's the economy. Now let's forget for a moment that you still have to ignore all the racism and bigotry in order to decide that you're going to concentrate on economic policies. And yeah, that still doesn't absolve you of. Actually, that might even make you a worse offender than people who are out and out racist and bigots because you're willing to ignore it, which is even worse. But even on the economics, he is trying to destroy not just the US economy, but the global economy. And how is he going to do that? Well, that's the subject of this article. Trump's tariffs would reorder trade flows, raise costs, and draw retaliation. And for those who are unaware, I don't know if this article explains tariffs, but if you're unaware, tariffs are great for protecting nascent industries. In that, let's say you were trying to get people to buy a certain product, whether it be I don't know, fidget spinners or solar panels, whatever. And you're new to the market and you want to establish a foothold, especially in your own country. You want people to buy your products and not the competitors. And the competitors are from outside the country. Well, then you put protective tariffs on because that would make things more expensive for the consumer to it would make it more expensive for the consumer to buy the product from overseas, so you're more likely to buy whatever was made in the US because it's cheaper. Now, Trump seems to think that tariffs are taxes on the opposite country. So, say you have tariffs on China, which we do, and Biden kept some of Trump's tariffs on China for that very reason. China isn't hurt by it. I mean, they're hurt in the sense that people are less likely to buy their goods because it's more expensive, but they are not literally paying anything. They are not paying the tariff. They are not paying that tariff money. The US consumer is paying that tariff money because it's just an extra tax on goods once they come into the port, not from the other end. So, with that in mind, let us continue on with the article. Iowa farmer Bob Hemisoth is worried that U.S. agriculture will pay dearly if Donald Trump wins Tuesday's presidential election and makes good on a vow to swiftly impose a 60% tariff on Chinese goods and at least a 10% levy on all other imports. So, again, that would be increasing the price to the U.S. consumer by 60% for Chinese goods and a 10% tariff on everybody else's goods. And he had previously stated that, yeah, this is just his power play to get more countries to develop goods in the US, to bring more jobs, to bring more companies to the US. All right, moving on. It could be a much worse rerun of the Republican former president's 2018 to 2019 trade war with China that hit U.S. farm goods with retaliatory tariffs and shifted Beijing's purchases to Brazil and Argentina, says Hemasath, who grows corn and soybeans and raises hogs on 2,800 acres of land in northeastern Iowa. All right. When we start putting tariffs on others, usually the retaliatory tariffs end up on American agricultural products, said Hemasath, who chairs the Farmers for Free Trade advocacy group. So this isn't some bleeding heart liberal. This is someone who is 100% for free trade, which means free market. It's amazing to me how many people who are screaming about the free market and how we should let the market do this or do that, unless it's something they don't like. And then suddenly it's no longer a free market. It's just, what I worry about is that when you do these kinds of things, you lose that market share. And you don't just get that market share back, he said. Hemasath declined to say who he was voting for in the election. I'm hoping that it's going to be Harris. Economists say that Trump's tariffs plans, likely his most consequential economic policy, would push U.S. import duty rates back to 1930-era levels, stoke inflation, collapse U.S.-China trade, draw retaliation, and drastically reorder supply chains. Yeah, I don't think I have to tell you guys how bad things were in the 30s. Granted, just look up the Great Depression. Just do that. I just cannot imagine why anybody would want to go back to that. I don't even understand why rich people would. Because, that hurt everybody. Rich people and poor people, like obviously the poor people even more because they were already poor. But the rich weren't exactly flying high here. I just can't see how anybody would want that. Hemasath's concerns were echoed in a recent study by the National Corn Growers Association and American Soybean Association, which forecast that a new China trade war could prompt deeper U.S. crop export losses, push down already depressed domestic prices, and cement a shift of China's imports to Brazil and China. Which some people might say, well, what's wrong with that? We import things for a reason. For some, it's just so people will have choice. And it's also for other things, it's that other countries grow or make things that we do not in the U.S. So that would just be hurting people who like certain products that you can only get from certain places. Now, let's see. So, U.S. crop export losses, which means that because we would be in a trade war with China, who's the most popular, one of the most populous countries? China. India is number 1, but China is number 2. So, because it's such a large export market for certain goods, of course China's not going to want our goods. Why would they? imposing retaliatory tariffs, of course they're not going to want to buy our goods. So that's not going to help us any. I can't speak to the already depressed domestic prices because I know nothing about how depressed those are. And if China starts importing from Brazil and Argentina, that just means that that's a market we lose. All right. Trump, who is in a neck-and-neck race for the White House against Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris, I still don't understand how that's possible, has called tariffs the most beautiful word in the world and argued that his plans would rebuild the U.S. manufacturing base, grow U.S. jobs and incomes, and earn trillions of dollars in federal revenues over 10 years. Again, if this was just protective tariffs, then that would be one thing. But basically, he wants to go after markets for daring to not do what he wants. And I said I still don't understand how it's neck and neck. And I really don't, because every argument that's used as to why people aren't supportive of Harris is basically, yeah, Trump would be worse. So, yeah, there is that. Continuing on with the article, economists universally agree tariffs are paid by the companies that import the products subject to the duties, and they either pass on the cost to consumers or accept lower profits. And let's face it, ever since the pandemic, the corporations, most corporations, not all, but most corporations have decided that they are going to try to suck up as much profits as they can and let the people assume it's inflation. Even though inflation's been going down, but they're going to keep the prices high because people haven't figured out that inflation has been going down and that they're just gouging us at this point. So no, they're not going to accept lower profits. Again, some companies might because they actually have a conscience, but not all. The duties, if fully imposed, would raise effective average U.S. tariff levels to 17.7%, the highest since 1934, according to the conservative-leaning Tax Foundation. Now, just think about that. This is a conservative-leaning organization. Again, not someone who you can accuse of being a bleeding heart liberal. The plans have drawn comparisons to the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, which sharply raised U.S. tariffs, triggering retaliation and a global collapse of trade that helped worsen the Great Depression. So yeah, that's just great. Now, in theory, the stock market after the Great Depression, safeguards were put in place so there would never be another Great Depression. But I really don't want to see if Trump is going to manage to break it. That's one mystery. That's one question I don't need to get solved. Even though there are so many people who are so enamored with Trump that a part of me is like, I wish Trump would win just to see the looks on their faces when their livelihoods are put into question because of Trump. But yeah, the damage would be too high. So I'm willing to get my schadenfreude on in other ways. In the aftermath of World War II, countries scrapped this beggar thy neighbor approach in favor of a rules-based trading system with much lower non-discriminatory tariffs and what is now the World Trade Organization at its core. The approach Trump is taking, I think, would totally destroy that system, said Maurice Obstfeld, an economist professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, who has served as the International Monetary Fund's chief economist from 2015 to 2018. So, in other words, we would have another Great Depression. He would break the system, and it wouldn't just be a huge recession, it would be a depression. Other countries would respond with tariff hikes of their own, and you basically open the door for a sort of free-for-all in trade policy, which I think, among other things, is very confusing for business, Obstfeld said. Overall, U.S.-China trade would plunge 70% from levels already reduced by Trump's 2018 to 2019 China tariffs that were maintained and recently increased by Democratic President Joe Biden, said Bernard Yaros, lead U.S. economist at Oxford Economics. Yaros said the post-tariff landscape would not shrink the overall U.S. trade deficit, but trigger a great reordering of trade flows with other countries that could be costly in the short run. Which you would think that would matter because so many people only think of the short term and don't think of long term. So Harris, who replaced Biden as the Democratic presidential candidate after he ended his campaign in July, has slammed Trump's tariff plans as a national sales tax that will cost U.S. families up to $4,000 a year. And that's generally what it would be because, think about it, the rich people aren't the ones who are going out and buying all these goods that are, number one, that have these high tariffs. And plus they can afford it. So it's not going to be as meaningful to them as it would to those who aren't rich. Yale University's Budget Lab estimates that the total reduction in annual household income under 10% global and 60% China tariffs would be $2,576, including the impact of retaliation, but could reach up to $7,600 if Trump makes good on comments in which he said he could impose a 20% global tariff and 200% levy on some goods from Mexico, including autos. The Yale lab, staffed by some former Biden administration economic and tax advisors, calculate that the Trump tariffs would initially raise the level of consumer prices by 1.2% to 5.1%, or about 7 to 31 months of normal inflation at the Federal Reserve's 2% annual target. Yeah, that basically the people who are whining about inflation now, even though it's been going down, because they don't know the difference between inflation and corporate price gouging, this would be far worse. A Trump campaign spokesperson responded by citing a study from the Coalition Prosperous America, a tariff advocacy group, which shows that a 10% universal tariff would not cause meaningful price increases and would, when combined with offsetting tax cuts, generate $728 billion worth of economic growth and 2.8 million jobs. The problem with that is that the tax cuts are going to the wealthy. They aren't going to the people who actually need the tax cuts. I mean, what was it, the 30s or the turn of the 20th century that people realized that we need an income tax because tariffs just isn't doing it. So yeah. Inflation did not significantly increase after the 2018 to 2019 Trump tariffs of 7.5% to 25% were imposed on $370 billion worth of Chinese goods. But his proposed 60% tariff would hit Chinese consumer goods ranging from toys to t-shirts with dramatically higher duties and the 10% universal tariff would apply to more than $3.8 trillion in annual U.S. imports. Harris has endorsed the Biden administration's more targeted approach to tariffs to protect strategic U.S. industries, but said in September that she would renegotiate the Trump-negotiated United States-Mexico-Canada agreement on trade in 2026 to protect U.S. automotive jobs. Trump may be able to act within months to impose tariffs, relying on the same Section 232 national security law used to impose global steel and aluminum tariffs and the Section 301 unfair trade practices statutes used for the tariffs aimed at China. Neither track would require approval by the U.S. Congress, and Trump could also invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Former U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, who engineered Trump's China tariffs, is advising the Republican candidate's campaign and is frequently mentioned in Republican circles as a potential cabinet member in a second Trump administration. Nazak Nikaktar, a trade and national security lawyer at Wiley Rein, who, as an assistant secretary at the Commerce Department during the Trump administration, said Section 232 could be applied to justify broader tariffs, while higher Chinese tariffs could easily be introduced under a Section 301 probe targeting China's subsidy and industry domination practices. A new investigation is not a heavy lift and can rely on well-documented evidence of unjustified Chinese export practices, Nikaktar said. You can complete one pretty quickly. It doesn't have to take a year. So, yeah. I mean, I understand that China does some shady shit, but it's just, when the experts are telling you that you're going to break the system and it could lead to another depression, I realize that a lot of Trump supporters, not all Republicans, but Trump supporters, have this idea that experts don't know what they're talking about, even though that's literally their job to know what they're talking about. Because experts sometimes make mistakes. Because that makes sense. So, hearing that experts are saying, yeah, this is going to be very bad, isn't going to sway those people. But the people who are supposedly still undecided, which I just don't understand how you can be, but are undecided, those people need to hear this, because those people probably do actually listen to experts, and if experts tell them this is a bad thing, that they're going to take that into account. Now, this isn't obviously part of the article, but for those who are screaming, but what about Gaza? Which, I hear you, Biden really, really messed up the Gaza thing. Totally screwed that up. Completely agree with you. Do you honestly think that Trump would be better with the Palestinians? He wants Netanyahu to win. When he says he wants Netanyahu to end this, he doesn't mean, oh, I want a ceasefire and the hostages back and, a two-state solution. No, he doesn't want both parties to get what they want. He wants Israel to get what it wants. And under Netanyahu, that is the Golan Heights, that is the West Bank, and that is Gaza. He wants it all. That's why there are illegal settlements being done and under Netanyahu's government's blessing. not the courts, but Netanyahu's blessing, because he wants to annex all of it. He doesn't want a two-state solution. Hell, he's said that many times. He doesn't want one. He wants Israel and only Israel. So even if that's your beef with Harris, which again, I totally understand that, you're not gonna get anything better under Trump. Actually, Palestinians will probably lose even more than what they have. I mean, if it's possible for Gaza to lose even more at this point because it's been devastated. But it's not going to be gaining anything. And it's definitely going to lose. So, I mean, obviously it sucks to have to hold your nose and make a pick. But still, a potential Harris presidency is still better for you. Because even if you don't like what she says about Gaza, she's a reasonable human being. You can actually talk to her and reason with her. Trump is not. So, that is my video imploring people to, if you're even considering Trump, to stop considering Trump. Because even for the reasons you might think he's better, he's not. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.